Welcome to Included Not Excluded. This episode comes at a time when many people working in and around special educational needs and disabilities feel caught in a prolonged state of waiting. There are signals of change from government, but details are delayed. Local authorities and councils are facing immense financial pressures. Schools, providers and families are left trying to make decisions without clear information about what comes next. Many parents describe this as being in limbo, not just waiting for support, but waiting for clarity. The conversation about SEND is often framed through crisis and that pressure is real. But today we wanted to slow things down and ask a more constructive question. When decisions are delayed and uncertainty is pushed down the system, what actually helps people move forward? So to explore this, I'm joined by Rod Turner, a parent navigating this uncertainty, and Claire Dorer, CEO of the National Association of Special Schools, who brings a national sector perspective. So, Rod, I'd like to start with you, if I may.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about your daughter and your journey so far.
Okay, so my daughter is 7 years old, and when you just kind of said that introduction, I thought, God, for only 7, this journey's been pretty long and arduous. So at 14 months, I'd say it was very clear that my daughter was not neurotypical. It became quite clear quite quickly that my daughter had quite complex needs, and my knowledge of autism at that point was fairly non-existent. It was, oh, all right, I think of Rain Man, I think of someone that's a bit quirky and a bit socially inept in a way, and these were my preconditioned thoughts about it. And I quickly learnt that that was very incorrect because my daughter did not fit any of those profiles. And from there, we kind of went on this journey of trying to find things that helped her. So my daughter doesn't speak. She never has done. She struggles to make the right sounds. She's very vocal in terms of the noise that she makes. And so to start with, it was kind of right, where do we go from here? And we started going down the speech therapy route. And I mean, she was a bundle of energy and could not sit still and could not focus. And so actually engaging in a therapy was incredibly difficult, and we were just kind of trying to throw the kitchen sink at it, and didn't really know where to go, and that kind of went on, and we eventually kind of realized that she was at the more complex end of the spectrum. And so I remember kind of at the beginning speaking to people about autism, and it was like, oh yeah, apparently it's very hard to spot in girls. I was like, well, not with us. It's pretty obvious. And so I realized that there was this kind of big spectrum that people talk about and varying needs and things like that. And so it was a case of, right, let's get advice from people who are in a similar boat. And I remember actually I managed to get a call with Karen Sorap, who's the founder of Beyond Autism. And I remember her saying to me, she was great because she managed my expectations well, because up until that point, life was very much about thinking, what's the future going to look like? And I remember it started off being, when your kid's born, you think, oh, well, God, you expect great things of them. And hey, this one's going to be president and all this sort of stuff. And as time went on, that went from, well, what are my hopes? And it was like, well, I hope we can go on a holiday. And then it went, oh, do you know what? I just hope we can go down the street and go to the shop. And then it was, God, I really hope in the future we can go to the park. And it's that realization of reality of what this means for you. And on that call with Karen Sorab, she said something that stuck with me and said, life will for you now be extreme highs and extreme lows. And she was absolutely right. And it was. So then it was a case of, right, okay, now at least we've got an understanding of what's going on. Let's find other people in the same boat who have trodden this path. And then it was kind of getting into early years. And again, we were really fortunate to get kind of involved with some charities, because until that point, there was nothing for us from an early years point of view that we could access. And so BeyondAutism early years were great. So we would go to the early years centre in Bromley, and that was helpful. And then we actually went on a week to Wales, which was kind of one of these magic wand moments for us, because up until that point, my daughter could not engage with anything. And I mean, the screaming was tough to bear with. And so we went there and we realised actually there are things she can do and she's capable of doing. We need to get the right environment for her. We need to get the right therapy around this. And so that continued. And then we thought, right, well, this is what's working for her now. And we need to continue what works. So let's do more of what works and less of what doesn't. And then we needed to get her into a specialist school. That was horrific. I guess we were in a fortunate position where we were able to beg, borrow, and steal some money and remortgage and get a lot of money to put her into a school. And I mean, the amount of money was absolutely ridiculous. But we could then prove that that was having a positive impact on her. And then from there, we were able to then go to tribunal. And this was our first tribunal, one of three. And considering she's 7, it's fairly ridiculous. So the first one we went into, I mean, for anyone out there that's been to tribunal, it's stressful, it's quite expensive. But the biggest issue is kind of headspace. It takes up all your mind because you are battling with another side who, whether they mean to or not, are incredibly frustrating. The local authority employed not one but 2 Casey barristers on that one to fight for them, and we won the tribunal. Well, actually, they gave in on the day, so for their stats, it didn't actually go to tribunal. And I think some statistic came out the other day saying it was 1.1% of cases that go to tribunal are won by the council, and that obviously doesn't include all the ones that are settled the hours before. And so we got there, and then by this stage, my daughter then got kind of, I wouldn't say diagnosed again, but then they were able to add a little bit more meat on the bone, because when you're 2, 3, 4, you're not able to show a lot of this stuff yet. And so by this time, she was actually diagnosed then with ASD, with profound disorder of intellectual development and complete absence of functional language. And so that's never nice to hear when you've got that intellectual part. And that really was the thing that I think affected me the most. Because actually I thought, do you know what? She's smart. If
Yeah.
there's something she wants, like lotion or creams or anything like that, she will find a way to get into a locked cupboard. We've got locks on everything, or had locks on everything, and she will find a way to get ice cream and take this. She's actually a great problem solver, but it's what drives that. And essentially where we ended up was realizing that intellectually my daughter is absolutely all there, but her ability to show it is the problem. Once we were able to realise that, the progress has just been absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, she's learned to ride a bike independently. I mean, we've gone on 2 holidays this year abroad on a flight, which would have been like, I mean, to even consider it would have been. We went to Cornwall and put a wetsuit on, which she would never have tolerated. And she's able to now communicate as well, not through speaking, but through typing. And so these things have just really opened up her world. But I think the key to it is looking at what the needs are of the child. And that's so hard to do. It sounds so easy, but when you speak to different therapies, they're all quite polarizing, and it's all right, this therapy is the way to do it, no, this therapy. And it's so hard as a parent to navigate that.
It's really helpful to get that context, Rod. Thank you. I think that what comes through all of that is the journey as parents that you go on just to try and make sense of everything, to try and find stuff out. I mean, you mentioned at one point there cost. I mean, that's not available to lots and lots of parents. And I think this is the wider context in which lots of families are facing with their children currently. So if I could bring Claire in, I mean, Claire, that must resonate with what we hear across the sector.
It does. I mean, I think it's sadly too common an experience. And I was reflecting how much of what Rod is experiencing is as a result of changes that we're anticipating for the system and for the sector. And I thought probably not that much. I mean, you're describing a journey which I've heard lots of people describe in the 20 plus years I've been in this sector. And I was thinking, so what makes it different at the moment? And there's that headline of uncertainty, which I think if you were doing a word cloud, you would probably have that really big and at the center. But I was thinking it's uncertainty in its own right brings anxiety. And I think what I'm seeing from parents, what I'm seeing certainly from schools is the not knowing, and it makes you doubt what's coming, which can in turn make you doubt what you're doing now. But I think it's more than that. It hasn't been your standard off the shelf uncertainty. It's been uncertainty with some real embellishments. You know, there have been some very juicy leaks and hints which have absolutely ramped up anxiety for parents about whether they're going to get support in the future, sustain support they've got now, for schools about, and I think particularly for special schools, is there gonna be an ongoing role for them? I mean, we keep getting throwaway lines that of course there'll always be a role for special schools for the most complex. We never dig below that line. So I think there is that real sense at the moment that we've taken a system that was already quite difficult to navigate and arguably never realised the full potential of the 2014 Children and Families Act. And then we've done as much as possible to put people in a really uncomfortable position within that already wobbly system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think within all of that, Rod, that background of the leaks around the HCPs and all the rest of it, I mean, how has that made you feel for the future of your daughter?
I mean, I think Claire's point about uncertainty and anxiety is on the money. I mentioned kind of we've had several tribunals, but the last one we had took 18 months. And so what was so frustrating with that was by the time actually the EHP was agreed, it was just non-applicable for my daughter because she had a lot of changes during that time. So I think it was literally 6 weeks after the EHCP was agreed, we had to call an emergency review. We and you think, well, we've got to argue this again because it's just and even all the specialist reports said, yeah, they're no longer applicable. And then you think, well, how long is this going to take to resolve? Oh, we're looking at least a minimum of a year again. And you just kind of put your head in your hands and think, oh my God. And I think what it's meant for us is thinking, look, we're just going to have to do this ourselves, really. And there is absolutely no confidence in the system from our point of view, like none. I mean, even last time we had, with the specialist placement we needed transport to get there. But then there was an issue with the transport. And so they said, well, why aren't you attending school? Because we can't get to it because you told us in the tribunal that we get transport. But then the transport is a whole different department. And again, with these leaks, they tell you, right, this is what we're going to do. But there's no actual detail on implementation, on the how, which is all the bits that matter. So it's kind of typical political sound bites and things like that obviously get people panicking.
And if there was something that you could say, if you were talking to the children's minister now, what would make a difference?
Well, if it's one department, if there's just one department that you're dealing with, that would make a difference. Who is the person ultimately responsible? What does a good job look like from the council's point of view? And how is that being measured? Because it's all well and good if the council are looking at their stats. I just think there are so many different people and departments that we have to deal with. And it is just a nightmare. Honestly, the emails, it's a full-time job as a parent, just dealing with local authority. I can't tell you the amount of emails that go back and forth to different people and the amount of double work that goes into it from not just from our side, but from the council side as well. So yeah, I think it's just got to be streamlined like anything. Easier said than done. So I'm not putting all blame on them because it's a huge amount of money as well. These things are not cheap. I mean, our daughter's package, the amount it costs is crazy. It doesn't need to cost that much, but there's inefficiencies. Really, we just need to know how things are being measured and what a good job looks like, and then we can start from there.
I think in the current conversations that are happening with the Department for Education and so on, the word accountability is coming up quite a lot. Claire, What do you think that this all means at the moment for choices that organisations and schools are being forced to make at the moment?
I'm not certain that schools are being forced to make particular choices. They are worried about what their future choices might be, what their future roles might be. And, this might link to something we think about later when we think about holding on to some hopefulness. The regulation, the legislation, how the wider system functions is fairly wonky at the moment. I'm not going to say absolutely broken because I think that there are elements that could work. I don't think it's fundamentally doomed. But if you look at what happens on the ground for tens of thousands of children, it is that they are getting the right support, they are getting the right mixture of education, therapy, and care in really good settings. And I think that whilst there is that pressure to jump for a future that you don't know exactly what is going to be involved in, the day to day that most people in most schools are still focused on is absolutely the right stuff to be doing. So I think there are systemic difficulties for schools in terms of admissions and not necessarily being able to admit the children you think you can make the biggest difference for. And when we're thinking about specialist provision, that really has got to be the decision about placements. Is it the right place for that child? I think there are difficulties for schools because we've got insufficiency of specialist places across the country. But I still think, in terms of what is affecting schools in the day to day, the real business of teaching, supporting children and young people, that hasn't had to change as a result of the system largely, I would say. And the hope I would have is, in the face of any system, I hope we will still have those talented, experienced, and passionate people who are the ones who are doing the work with the children.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good point, Claire. And I think, at Beyond Autism in our own schools and services, you're right. Every day we provide the education that those children absolutely deserve and expect, and that doesn't change.
I was wondering if I got a crack to have a question for the ministers as well, because I would really like to appeal to Bridget Phillipson and Wes Streeting, so health and education, for both of them to be really brave when it comes to policy. To talk about a policy that might take a generation to implement, that they are doing something that will not give them personal political gain, but recognizes that we have an education system and a health system that simply is not meeting the needs of enough people. And to be braver to go back to education, to think about what it's for, who it's for, how children today have different needs, different experiences from children when this education system was really put together 100 years ago. And to take it and to think, Rod, you talked about getting the systems to work together and to be thinking about how we meet need. Because, Rod, you said that this is something that costs. But actually, when we did return on investment research on this 2.5 years ago, meeting your daughter's needs now, it's not only a good thing for her and for you as a family, but there's really good evidence to say that as she comes into adulthood, because her needs have been met, because she is developing the skills you've talked about, being able to tolerate things more, ride bikes, have a meaningful, leisure activities, that ultimately costs the state less. And we see so little investment in the research that's long term, that talks about impact later on of things that cost money now. And I would really love ministers to be less obsessed with the cost now and more obsessed with the longer term value.
I think that kind of nails it for everything politically, doesn't it, really? Short term, a 4-year period or 5-year period versus actually looking at the longer term. And yeah, I totally agree. It's if we can do early support and early intervention, it costs everyone less, not just in money, but in everything else. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that, Claire. Really helpful. So let's try and shine some positivity through this podcast as well. Rod, if another parent was listening and they feel a bit stuck right now, what would you want them to know?
Again, I can only speak from our experience with my daughter who's complex needs, and her profile will be very different to other people's. So from our point of view, it was, don't get yourself in complete despair when you get some of these diagnoses through, because it's easy to, and it's easy to kind of, to be honest, get very depressed thinking about the future, because it's, I don't know, cliches, the future's not written yet and all that kind of stuff. And actually what we've found over the last 6 to 12 months is things have really, really changed for my daughter. We've managed to find one or two things that have clicked. So I think it's, look, have that sense of grit and resolve to keep going with things that are working. And it's slow progress to start with. But if something's working, like, ramp it up, do more of it. And if it's not, then change. Look at other aspects. And I mean, there's so many things as a parent that I mean, at one point we would have tried anything. Do you know what I mean? But there's always these things. But just speak to other people in similar things, and speak to them. What's worked for them? What did they find useful? What did they find not useful? Why? And I think speaking with other people who have trodden that path has been really, really helpful for us. And there's lots of charities and CICs out there. Other parent-led ones are really good as well. So I'd get onto some of those and yeah, Google them and go and have a chat.
Thanks, Rod. Claire, from a sector perspective, where do you see people making a real positive difference?
I've talked about working with individual children and young people, but I'm really struck by what people do to work together in spite of the system not making that easy. So I certainly think we need something that promotes more formal links between special schools and mainstream schools, that looks at how you share and develop knowledge across the education sector as a whole. And it's certain that the current system doesn't make that easy, but it also doesn't prevent it. So what gives me real hope and also impresses me hugely is some of the partnerships I see between special schools and mainstream schools. So there are many, but I'll mention William Henry Smith School in Brighouse in West Yorkshire that does some really good work with Calderdale and has managed to define and sustain a partnership. And, they're not alone in that. There are not as many sustainable and replicable answers as I would like, but it happens. So I think it's that holding on to, we may get a white paper and we may get a bill that we don't particularly like the look of, but it's trying to hold on to the fact that legislation and regulation shape provision. They don't have to define it. And it's trying to remember that the things that make people creative and curious and relational about their practice, they don't have to be crushed. Things don't have to stop just because the overarching framework is not perfect.
If clarity could be brought to just one area, where do you think it would matter most?
Because of the day job, I really want to see a definition of what the role of special schools is. I have been in the sector a long time and, I'm slightly like a broken record on this, but the last time government looked at the role of special schools was getting on for 23 years ago now. And I was an official in the Department for Education, so it was my job to be part of the review. And it's been too long since we set out what we want special schools to do. And you can't reduce them to a single line of course, there'll always be a role for them. The expertise that's there could and should be used more widely, but also those schools who have the privilege of working intensively with a group of young children with relatively low incidence needs need the support to recognise they will be the places where future pedagogy, future therapy and care and mental health interventions are developed. And I would love to see some recognition and support for the sector as being the research and development arm of education for children with additional needs.
That's a really great point. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I guess I just want to check and see if there's any other points you feel you wanted to have made during this episode today. So, Rod, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Maybe just reiterating that point that it is tough. It's hard to be a parent of a child with additional needs. So you've got to look after yourself as well. And things like respite and things like that aren't always available to everyone. So being able to go to something where there's other people in the same boat is so useful, whether it's just, I don't know, coffee morning with other parents who are living sort of similar challenges. Do go and do that, because it can be really, really valuable.
That's a great message. Thanks, Rod. And Claire, any last points you'd like to make?
Thinking about leaders in education and how you maintain your sanity in this time of uncertainty, and how you maintain the sanity of those who work for you. And I think there's a sort of particular difficulty for those who lead in education, who will be managing staff who feel really uncertain and are generally really good at that, but then maybe not always so good at managing their own uncertainty and the stress that that produces. I think it's hard not knowing exactly when we'll see the white paper. We keep getting hints of when it's coming, and then something happens and we don't. And at the moment, I'm wondering what the impact of the leaks over the Christmas period will be on when we actually do see the white paper. But I'm also thinking personally about how much attention I give to the noise at the moment and how helpful it is to keep tuning into the leaks and the speculation, because when we get the white paper, I will know soon enough what's in it, and then I will have to deal with it, whatever is in it. And in the meantime, I'm not certain it's a great use of my energy and well-being to keep listening to this. So, I may be muting a few threads and sticking my fingers in my ears and saying, la, 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 not listening, until I've got a white paper in front of me.
Great. So just to wrap up then, for families, schools and professionals listening, this is a sort of difficult moment currently. We're waiting without clear information, and for some that can be exhausting and it can take its toll. And like Claire says, I think we all need to think about our own resilience and mental health and how we want to handle some of that at this time. So today's conversation doesn't pretend that there are easy answers, but it does remind us that even in a system under intense pressure, the way decisions are made, communicated and prioritized really does matter. So thank you, Rod and Claire, for bringing honesty and clarity to a complex and often emotionally charged conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Included Not Excluded wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with someone who cares about inclusion and education. To learn more about Beyond Autism, access free resources, or make a donation to support our work with autistic children, young adults and families, visit the Beyond Autism website. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep asking, what does true inclusion look like?